I've decided to come on and record a podcast video vlog about my time at the Pineal Foundation, the commune that I lived on for 6 months in 2020. That commune is currently all over the media, and I want to speak about my time there for two reasons, which I will get into shortly. The first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to preface this video with a trigger warning. A child passed away at that commune in 2021 after I'd left, which is one of the reasons that the commune is now in the media. And I'm going to be talking about what I experienced there, and I'm going to give my opinion on what I believe has potentially caused that child's death. And so I'd just like to take a moment to give a trigger warning, and to anyone who might be listening, that this content is potentially very upsetting. I don't really know where to start, so I think I'm just going to talk. I joined the Pineal Commune in August of 2020. I was a single mother, and I'd left the UK in June of that year. I am a conspiracy theorist, as I'm so fond of being called. I prefer to think of it as not allowing people to touch and poison my children. But I left the UK in June of 2020 because I was very aware that what was happening with the lockdowns and with the testing and with the pokes wasn't something that I was prepared to allow my children to be a part of. And so I left the UK and I went to Crete, and I left with very little money. I had very little plan. I was just making a gigantic leap of faith that what was happening around, I'm going to pull this mic closer because I'm outdoors. What was happening around me wasn't something that I was prepared to allow my children, or indeed myself, to be a part of. It wasn't something I was going to acquiesce to. And so I left the UK, we went to Crete, and we began a new life as sovereign nomads, or COVID refugees, as I liked to refer to us as at the time. And I was in Crete, I was having a wonderful, wonderful time, but it was very intense. I was sort of feeling this sort of lone anarchist thing, for want of a better, I can't really think of how to explain it, but I was alone with my two children. And though I was meeting some wonderful, other sovereign families, I was still feeling quite alone, and I was feeling quite intimidated, especially when I was refusing to wear masks in shops and things like that. And I was also aware that wherever I was going in Crete, there was a lot of alcohol. My kids were being exposed to a culture with a lot of alcohol. And that's something I really, really, really don't like. I don't vibe with it at all. I don't like anybody that's on the frequency of alcohol, even if they've just had one drink. I don't like the frequency that someone is on once they've had alcohol. And for that reason, I decided to take me and my children and join the Pineal Commune in August. Now, I became later aware, you can't not become aware as soon as you step foot in that place, but I became aware once I got there that Martin Kenny is a notorious YouTuber. He garnered sort of following on YouTube with his views on flat earth, and that's not something I'm going to debate here. I give it zero thought to what shape the earth is. Do I think we've been lied to by every single official body, from NASA down to your local council? Yes, I do. Do I think the earth's flat? No. I think it's a globe? No. Am I here to debate that? No. I've given it very little thought, and as a result, I wasn't aware of who Martin Kenny, this sort of YouTube persona or YouTube following that he had. I had made touch with Martin, I think it was back in April of 2020, because I knew I was planning to leave the UK, and nobody in my immediate reality could see what I could see. you know what 2020 was like. And I'd gone on YouTube looking for other people, you know, I think I'd searched community living or something along those lines. And I came across a video of Martin Kenny and 2 other people who were at that commune, who went on to become great friends. But I came across a video of the 3 of them, and they were talking about this commune that they were going to be starting in Portugal. And that's how Martin Kenny came across my radar. I didn't have a clue who the guy was prior to April of 2020. So while I'd been in Crete, I'd been in sort of quite sporadic contact with him. And, you know, as the weeks went on, like I said, we were getting into sort of late July, early August. I was feeling really, I'd really struggling with fighting my case with masks and all the rest of it on my own. Wasn't appreciative of the alcohol in the culture that I was experiencing. So Martin was sort of, at that point, I mean, and it's a tactic that I know is used with a lot of other people there. There are other people who are sharing their experiences of their time at Pineal on YouTube at the moment. I will share that. I'm sharing their stories on my platform. But other people have also sort of verified this, that he would love bomb you. Sort of, you know, come here and everything will be okay. Everything will be okay. And so the main reason I went was because I really liked the thought of 2 things. I liked the thought, no, there's 2 strict rules at Pineal, one which there's thousands, but the 2 main ones. No animal products, so strictly vegan, plant-based, and no, it's not plant-based, we'll get into this. Strictly vegan and no animal products and no alcohol. And although I wasn't vegan at the time, and I'm going to go deeply into why I believe the vegan ideology is behind the fact that the children there are malnourished and starving, as well as the people, the grown adults, but the children mainly. Although I wasn't vegan at the time, I was very health conscious. I am very health conscious. And I did believe in 2020 that a vegan diet was the healthiest way to live. And although I wasn't personally practicing it, it was because of my lack of willpower and or divine intervention. But I really liked the thought of being somewhere. I was like, right, we'll get super healthy, you know, we'll be abiding by the vegan ideology. There'll be no alcohol. But more importantly, I really, really, really vibed with the thought of community, with the thought of my children and me being amongst other people who were refusing to mask, who were refusing to test, who were seeing everything for what it is, and who were actively working towards a plan B. That was what really, really pulled me in. These people appeared to be actively working towards a plan B. We see what's going on. We see this is all bullshit. Fuck this. We're going to, you know, care for our kids ourselves. We're going to make sure our kids can grow up healthy and free and without any of this nonsense. That was what pulled me. And so off we went. We arrived at Pineal on the 16th of August. You're encouraged when you get there to hand all your money over. The sort of ethos being that once you're there, everything's provided for. You are provided for. You have your shelter, you have your food, you have your community. What do you need money for? What I also realised in hindsight is that Martin Kenny is just as much as a fearmongerer as the mainstream media. So while we were all there thinking that we weren't buying into this mainstream media panic of everything that was being played out there, Martin Kenny equally would be holding meetings every day, warning of us that, you know, there was an impending financial crash. Cash was about to become obsolete. Any money that was sitting in your bank account was, you know, going to become worthless. We had to get it out. We had to spend money. Cash was about to become obsolete. If you could go into debt, even better. Take credit cards out. Take as much money as you can out and give it to the community. Everything's going to crash shortly. And he would even give specific dates. He started with a date in September. So obviously this was back in August when I first started. And he had everybody sort of pinned towards this September. This is going to be the date where cash is going to be obsolete. Everybody get your bank accounts emptied by now. And when September came and went, he then started fixating on the 21st of December as the winter solstice, as this impending date for, you know, calamity. And, you know, lots of us bought into it and lots of us believed it. I mean, mainly because he isn't wrong in what he was saying, in that there's going to be an impending financial crash. You know, it's pretty obvious when you do look at things that the World Economic Forum is saying, and things, when you do look at what has been, you know, made public knowledge, it's obvious what is happening, and, you know, we're heading towards a digitalized currency and all the rest of it. However, what Martin does is he zones in, and he really does sort of come with this guru God complex, that he's having visions and that he's got this direct channel. And so you were actively encouraged to empty your bank account when you got there, under the proviso that, you know, what did you need money for? You were going to be totally taken care of. And I did. I emptied my bank account when I got there. I was a single mother. I'd left the UK with £500. But while I'd been in Crete, while I'd been travelling, I'd been selling my own ebooks. I'd been generating an income online, and I'd generated, I think, little under £3,000. And with that money, I got us over to Portugal, and then I just gave it all to Martin. And indeed, we were housed and fed. And I only stayed for 6 months, so I ended up justifying all of that expenditure. There were women there. There were specifically 2 women, one who is currently speaking publicly right now, one who isn't, but is consulting with her legal team on how to get reimbursed. But it seemed to me to be predominantly single women who were handing over the bulk of the generated income that Martin was insisting that you give. So that was the first thing. So I arrive, it's August, I empty my bank account, and I really enjoyed my time there. Excuse me. Everything's a lesson. I firmly believe that you are where you're supposed to be, experiencing what you're supposed to be experiencing. And even with the greatest of hindsight, I don't think I would not go to Pineal again. It was a baptism by fire. Want of a better word, it really fucking was. So when you arrive at these places, or indeed I think when you're going to these places, when you're on a journey of awakening, I think you put people into a hierarchy. You do it yourself unintentionally, but you think there's people that are more awakened than you. You think there's people that are further down the path than you. You think there are people with a closer connection to the divine with you. And there's one thing that experience taught me, it's that, oh by God, there isn't. Everything's just a reflection at the end of the day. And there's no one with a more accurate connection to God than you. You are God. You are God incarnate. You are the whole universe incarnate. Nobody, not Eckhart Tolle, not Carl Jung, nobody's further down their awakening journey than you are. And when it does, if there's one thing I've taken from this, when it comes to looking at people, anybody, a person online, an author, anybody, when it comes to someone whose wisdom you want to learn from, take what you need and leave the rest, and remember that nobody is infallible and that everybody still shits in the morning. The only pedestals people are on are the ones you're putting them on. And it became very, very, very apparent to me once I got there. Because like I said, I didn't know that Martin had this huge cult following online. I wasn't aware he was this sort of hailed guru. I just thought he was a guy that had seen what was happening and had thrown a plan B together. And it wasn't until I got there that I realised actually he was forming a community of devout followers. And it was curious to me as to why I'd been allowed to be there, because it became super apparent to me when I got there that I wasn't in this groupie train. Like, why was I here? I didn't know who the guy was. He didn't like that. He didn't like it when a truther didn't know who he was. He hails himself as quite the authority in the alternative truther world, and he didn't like that I didn't know who he was. And I was sort of like, why have I been allowed to come? And then it became very apparent. So I speak often loudly and very publicly about the fact that I free birthed my youngest daughter. And I believe that when women birth in power, they would change the world. I believe that free birth is the answer to all of it and everything. And I've spoken loudly and proudly about that, and I will continue to do so. And Martin picked up on that. And unbeknownst to me, when I was invited there, his wife, Gabby, was pregnant with their third child, who is the child that went on to pass away. And I'd been invited in my free birth expertise, so it turned out. And I was thrilled about that. I was thrilled that, because, you know, I love that thought of community, that, you know, you're all there to be of service to each other and to help each other grow and to help each other thrive. That to me was what this new paradigm that we were creating was. So the fact I'd kind of sort of thought when I was going there, like, what can I possibly contribute? I'm a shit gardener, you know, I'm not the most meditative yogi. You know, I'm an angry broadcast journalist that argues about corruption. Like, what can I bring to the table? And when he told me that was why he'd asked me to come, because he wanted me to sort of midwife, I was so happy. I was honoured. I was honoured. I felt like I'd been seen for a skill set that I could bring. And yeah, so August, September, fucking brilliant. The sun was shining. You know, I felt super healthy and super. I'm having to move the mic because my kids are playing and I can really hear them. I'm hoping you guys can't. The sun was shining. I married two of my friends. I don't mean that in a way. I officiated the ceremony between the most beautiful man and woman who are still dear friends. What up, Martina and Toste? And you know, it was good. And then you started to see things. So it soon became very apparent that, so the first, I'll tell you when the shift happened. When two other guys joined, Jay and James. Now, what was truly interesting about these guys joining was they didn't give a penny. They weren't asked to give any money at all. It'd only been the women at that point. And a few of the men, but these two weren't. These two guys weren't asked to hand over. Didn't have a penny to hand over. A. B, weren't even asked to. And this was Jay and James. This was when the balance started to shift. So this was, actually no, I'm gonna list all of my red flags. I'm going to list all of my red flags. J and J were the second. The first red flag that I experienced was when I first arrived at Pineal. I hadn't worn a mask up until arriving in Portugal. And I want to specify what I did. I flew from Manchester to Amsterdam, from Amsterdam to Athens. I sailed from Athens to Crete. I holidayed in Crete. Didn't wear a mask once, despite regularly going in restaurants and shops. I then sailed from Crete to Athens. I flew from Athens to Madrid. I flew from Madrid to Porto, and I got a taxi from Porto Airport to the Pineal Commune, all of which the drive itself took about 4.5 hours, it felt like. Didn't wear a mask once. Hadn't worn a mask once. Travelled during lockdown, travelled during essential travel. Fought my fucking case at every single turn. Fought against flight attendants, police, airport staff, shop attendants, hotel attendants, taxi drivers. My children watched me refuse to mask up. Want to know when the first time I had to put a mask on was? Yeah, it was under the guise of the great free-thinking guru, Martin Kenny. So when I arrived at Pineal, it became very obvious very quickly that there was no food. They were buying everything. And that was fair enough. This was a brand new community. They'd got the land at a certain price because it was severely fire damaged. The ground was, fucking ruined. There was no food. They weren't growing food. There was no food being grown. The gardens were in the process of being, dug up, turned over, whatever it is that you do to soil. And the gardens were in the process of being planted. So they were going out buying food. And they were masking up every time they did it. And this was my first red flag. This was, I to this day, cannot put a fucking mask on. I won't. But they'd mask up to go in Lidl. And the reasons were that, they weren't here to create a fuss. They were here to live in peace. And I couldn't get my head around it, but I got my head around it because I did it. But I refused to. I sort of started leaving the girls with friends on the commune if I needed to go out, because I will not let my children see me bend over to this bullshit. So that was the first red flag for me, was that they were masking up and going in shops and, bending over. But that was my issue, and I chose to stay, as I've chosen to participate in every part of my life. So that was the first red flag. The second red flag was when Jay and James joined. This was... Sorry, I had to see to my girls. Jay and James joined. I weren't asked to give any money, and that's when the dynamic shifted. So Jay sort of came in, and I don't know if it's because he hadn't given any money and everybody knew that. And despite, the whole everybody's equal, there was a shift when you knew that some people had given tens of thousands, and some people hadn't even given, 20 euros. There does become an underlying shift of, well, what the fuck? So Jay came in and immediately started inserting dominance. He sort of took control in the kitchen, and then the second red flag came for me when my daughter, who at the time was 7, came sobbing to me. She'd gone in the kitchen to get a carrot. My daughter can snack on raw veg morning, noon and night. And she'd gone in the kitchen to get a carrot, and Jay had absolutely screamed at her. And she came back sobbing, and that became the first of many altercations that I had with Jay and with Martin. And Martin and Jay and James, there are several other people, like I said, speaking out on YouTube, and I watched someone speak out last night on what they experienced there in 2021. And they described this power triangle, this Martin, Jay and James, as the corporation. And I just thought, that's how it was. It became these three, what these three said, everything else went. And I'd like to, I'm going to wrap up my story, actually. I'm going to wrap up my experience there, and then I'm going to talk directly on 2 points that are the reason I've chosen to speak out publicly. It was great until it wasn't. It soon became super, 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 super apparent that it was a cult. I decided to leave when there was another family there. I'm not going to name them. A husband and wife, they'd come from Slovakia, and they had 2 beautiful girls, beautiful, beautiful daughters, similar age to my daughters. Our daughters got on beautifully. And she was great. I adored her. She was someone that I would have met in my real life, but she was just this devoted homeschooling, bilingual, marvellous cook, permaculture, absolute wealth of knowledge. Had built cob houses and all sorts. She was just the absolute person you'd want on your apocalypse team, without a fucking shadow of a doubt. You want this woman on your apocalypse team. And she and I used to talk about how concerned we were at how little food the kids were getting given, how little food all of us were getting given, but particularly the children. And it was something that she and I were speaking about at length. I chose to leave when I witnessed that woman getting horrendously bullied by a man who was much, much, much bigger than her, who was swearing at her in front of her children, who was towering over her. And I intervened, and then a family meeting was called. And it was the handling of that meeting that made me publicly go on Facebook and tell people that I needed help getting out. But the meeting was called, headed up by Martin and Jay, who held this whole meeting for the whole family. As they do daily meetings, daily compulsory meetings. But this particular meeting was held by Martin and Jay, insisted that the behaviour that I had witnessed had been caused by the woman, and that she was aware of that, and they were going to help her. They were going to start giving her meditative therapies they recommended Vipassana, which for those of you who don't know is where you sit in silence. Tell me you're a cult without telling me you're a cult. And so when I witnessed that, and then when I saw the handling of it afterwards, I knew that this was no longer a safe space for me and my children. I had to leave. And I went on Facebook, and I announced that I felt I was trapped there and that I had no income, and that if anyone was feeling so called, could they please purchase my ebook? And if anyone's listening to this that was one of those people that purchased my ebook in that time, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I got enough money together. I got enough money to get my girls and me to an apartment somewhere else in Portugal. And that was at the start. That was in December 2020. And from then on, life has been magnificent. So I would like to now talk about... I'm just going to talk about two things that I think are going to directly come off the back of the Pineal Foundation and Martin Kenny being in the media at this time. The first is that, I mean, he makes all homeschooling unpoked families look like negligent lunatics, and I'm very aware that I'm just very aware of how it's now going to be portrayed. And I want to make my thoughts on this really clear, and I anticipate that this is probably going to piss a lot of people off. But this is my opinion, and this is my story. I don't believe the state has any right to intervene with a child's medical care at all. At all. I find it horrendously triggering when I read about the cases where parents are hauled to courts and their child's are given chemotherapy and all manner of medical treatments and interventions against the parents' will. It rips my heart out, and that the state has no right. Nobody has a right to make calls over a child's medical state other than the mother, not the father. I know this is going to piss a lot of people off. But the father doesn't. Only the mother does. Only the mother has that instinctive call. Only the mother has that primal protective bond. Only the mother knows when her child needs an intervention from an outside source. What I witnessed firsthand happening at Pineal is the mother's intuition is massively overridden, and that the word of Martin and Jay specifically, and James, but Martin and Jay really do have this manipulative hold. They are gaslighting the mothers, and they are overriding the mother's intuition. The children there are starving. The people there are starving. You cannot thrive on a vegan diet. A child needs minerals and nutrients that can only are bioavailably only available in a bioavailable form from animals. There's no such thing as a bloodless diet. Martin Kenny, if you're watching this, Jay, if you're watching this, they buy everything, okay? They're buying cashew nuts, they're buying avocados, they're buying all the non-dairy milks, they buy coconut oil and round the fucking clock. They are importing all their cacao, they are importing all of their exotic fruits, they are importing pretty much everything. All these almonds and cashews that you're making your non-dairy milks with, you are raping and killing the planet. Okay, it's 2023, guys. Western A, price yourselves up. The vegan diet is the quickest way to kill the earth. It's the quickest way to rape the earth, and it's also the quickest way to starve your children. The children there are starving. My daughter was repeatedly shooed and bullied out of the kitchen by Jay, by a grown man. And not just my daughter. not just my daughter. I'm in touch with lots of mothers who were at the commune, and it wasn't just my daughter that was bullied by Jay. The children there are really, 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 really hungry. They are on a diet that's high in leafy greens, that's high in oxalates. They're being fed an inordinate amount of seed oils. And I witnessed them encourage the eldest, Martin Kenny's eldest son, to fast. He's an extremely slender young boy. Fasting's encouraged, breatharianism is encouraged. And I left the commune before Gabby gave birth. So although Martin told me that he'd invited me to be there because of the free birth, sorry, I've lost my train of thought. I left in December of 2020, and I believe that Gabby gave birth in either the February or the March. It could have even been the April. I don't know, but it was after I left. The birth was apparently blissful. Viv talks about this on and the baby was shared on social media. He looked glorious, he looked beautiful, he looked healthy. I don't claim to know what happened. I believe that none of the children there are being nourished. I believe that the mother's instincts there are being overridden. I believe that all the mothers there are gaslit by Jay and James and Martin. They are talking with pride and glee about how they have had 4 babies birthed successfully on their land. Well, yeah, that's great. I believe those 4 babies have only been fathered by Martin and James. I know that Jay has been reaching out repeatedly over the past 3 years to young girls on social media. The messages and the screenshots that I've been sent, there's a pattern there. I believe that all the women, 3 women particularly, I believe that Gabby, Katia, and the woman who I didn't meet, but who has since given Martin Kenny another baby there, I believe they're there in an abusive relationship. I don't think that they know they're in an abusive relationship, but I believe they're there under coercion. I believe they're there under manipulation. And I think that if the mothers could break away from there, they would be able to see with more clarity that is not a healthy, nor is it a nourishing environment for young children to be in. It's not a healthy or nourishing environment for anybody to be in. But it's certainly not a nourishing environment for children to be in. That's all I've got to say on this right now. There is more that I feel I could say and I should say. But I'm still now processing what it was that happened there. And there's so many of you reaching out to me on social media who have also experienced pineal in 2021, in 2022, and our stories are so similar that if you are someone who's been at pineal watching this, share your story. I really want to encourage you to share your story. I was encouraged to do this after watching some of you guys speak out on YouTube, and I just think the more people that speak out, the better, because it's just the pattern that we've all got is so similar, from sort of being love bombed at the beginning to getting there and to it all being this sort of honeymoon phase, to you then getting bullied and manipulated and gaslit by these same two guys, the same two guys, their names appeared from all of your messages. So if you are someone, you know, that did experience massive coercion and manipulation there, speak out, because the women in particular need to be aware of what they are potentially stepping into when they go to that place. Okay, that's all I've got to say on this for now.